Dr. David Chen is human botanist working at the Thessari Imperial Botanical Gardens, extensive research facility attached to the Royal Palace complex, encompassing hundreds of acres of cultivated gardens, experimental agricultural plots, research greenhouses, and laboratory facilities where scientists from multiple alliance species study plant biology, crop development, and ecological systems. David accepted temporary 3-year research assignment at the gardens through Alliance Scientific Exchange Program. His expertise is in cross-species agricultural compatibility, studying how crop varieties developed by one species might be adapted for cultivation in environments suited to other species. Research that has practical importance for Alliance food security and for supporting colonies where local agriculture hasn't yet been fully established. He's been at the Thessari Gardens for 3 months, working primarily on project examining how human grain varieties might be modified for Thessari soil chemistry and climate conditions. The work is technical and absorbing, analyzing soil compositions, testing various genetic modifications, documenting growth patterns under different environmental variables. His daily routine rarely brings him into contact with palace officials or court personnel. The botanical gardens operate with significant autonomy. The research conducted there is valuable to the empire, but it's scientific work rather than political activity, existing in sphere somewhat separate from the ceremonial and governmental functions that occupy most of the palace complex. David's world is contained within the research facilities. The greenhouses where experimental crops are cultivated under controlled conditions, the laboratories where genetic analysis occurs, the outdoor garden sections where field trials are conducted. He collaborates with Thessari botanists and with researchers from other alliance species, attends scientific seminars, produces research reports. He's aware that the gardens are technically part of the Royal Palace complex. The facility was established centuries ago as Royal Patronage Project and remains under palace administration. But in practical terms, the connection feels distant. He works in scientific environment, not in political one. The elaborate hierarchies and protocols governing court life don't extend into the greenhouses where his days are spent. He knows intellectually that Queen Seraphina and the royal family presumably live somewhere in the vast palace structure. But he's never seen them, has no reason to encounter them. Moves in completely different spheres, research scientist working on agricultural problems, far removed from the sovereignty and statecraft occurring in other parts of the complex. This separation is about to be disrupted by encounter David has no way to anticipate or prepare for. The incident begins on routine afternoon when David is working in one of the outdoor garden sections, extensive cultivated area where various plant species are grown in conditions that approximate their natural environments. He's taking soil samples from plot where modified human wheat variety is being tested, documenting the chemical composition so he can correlate it with the growth rates he's been observing. The work is methodical and solitary. He's alone in this section of the gardens. The Thessari researchers who normally work nearby are attending seminar, and the other human scientists on the exchange program are working in different areas of the facility. David is focused on his sampling procedure, carefully extracting soil cores at precise intervals, labeling them for laboratory analysis, when he becomes aware of being watched. He looks up to find young Thessari child standing perhaps 3 meters away, observing him with undisguised curiosity. She appears to be 5 or 6 years old by Thessari developmental standards, old enough to walk and speak fluently, young enough that she still has the proportions and the unselfconscious body language of early childhood. She's wearing clothing that David's limited knowledge of Thessari fashion recognizes as well-made, quality materials, careful construction, but not ostentatiously formal or decorated in ways that would signal particular status. Just nice children's clothing suitable for active play. Her skin shows bright, curious gold, the Thessari chromatic pattern indicating interest and friendly engagement. Her expression is openly fascinated, watching David's soil sampling with the kind of intense attention that young children focus on activities that seem mysterious or interesting to them. David smiles and returns to his work, assuming the child is daughter of one of the palace staff or perhaps of one of the researchers, exploring the gardens in the way curious children do. After several minutes of silent observation, the child moves closer. "What are you doing?" She asks with the direct bluntness that children use before social conditioning teaches them indirect approaches. I'm collecting soil samples, David explains, continuing his work while talking. I need to test what's in the soil so I can understand why these plants are growing the way they are. Why do you need to understand? The child asks, the inevitable follow-up question that children employ, digging deeper into explanations. Because I'm trying to help these plants grow better in Thessari soil, David says. They're from my home planet, and they don't naturally grow well here. So I'm studying what's different about your soil compared to ours and trying to figure out how to change the plants so they'll grow properly. Are you from far away? The child asks, her attention shifting from the soil to David himself. Yes, quite far, David confirms. My planet is many weeks of travel from here. Do plants there look different? She continues, her questions flowing with the rapid-fire enthusiasm that characterizes children's interrogations when they've found adult willing to engage. David spends the next 20 minutes answering her questions while continuing his work. The child is bright and genuinely curious. Her questions suggest she's actually processing the information he's providing rather than just asking random things. She wants to know about Earth's plants, about how they differ from Thessari species, about why some plants grow in some places but not others, about whether he misses his home planet. David finds himself enjoying the interaction. He has younger siblings back on Earth, has always found children's unfiltered engagement with the world refreshing compared to adults' more guarded social interactions. The child's questions are interesting. They make him think about his work from perspectives he doesn't normally consider. After perhaps 25 minutes of this conversation, the child announces with sudden decision. You should come meet my mother. She likes plants too. She would want to see what you're doing. David assumes this is child wanting to share something interesting she's discovered with her parent. Probably someone who works in the palace in administrative or service capacity. Maybe someone with amateur interest in gardening who the child thinks would appreciate seeing the research David is conducting. That's kind of you, David says, but I need to finish this sampling work before the afternoon light changes. Maybe another time. The child considers this for a moment, then reaches up and takes David's hand with small, warm grip. It won't take long, she's not far, come on. She begins tugging him toward the palace with the confident insistence that small children employ when they've decided something should happen. David allows himself to be pulled to his feet, intending to walk a short distance with the child and then gently redirect her back to wherever she's supposed to be. He assumes someone, parent, caretaker, palace staff member responsible for supervising children, will intervene shortly to collect her, and he can return to his work. But as they leave the garden section and approach the palace proper, no one stops them. Palace guards stationed at the garden entrance see them approaching, human researcher and young Thessari child, the child leading him by the hand, and step aside without comment, opening the path into the palace corridors. David finds this slightly unusual, but not alarming. Perhaps the guards recognize him as authorized researcher who works in the gardens and assume he has legitimate reason to enter the palace. Perhaps they recognize the child as belonging to someone with palace access and assume she's meant to be bringing visitors. They enter the palace through side entrance that David has used occasionally when attending administrative meetings about his research project. The corridors here are functional rather than ceremonial, staff areas where the daily work of palace administration occurs. The child navigates these corridors with confident familiarity, still holding David's hand, chattering continuously about various topics that seem to interest her. She points out decorative elements in the corridor that she particularly likes. She asks David about his boots. Apparently human footwear is fascinating to her, different enough from Thessari styles that she wants detailed explanation of how they work and why they're designed that way. David answers her questions while becoming progressively more aware that they're moving deeper into the palace than he's ever been before. The corridors are becoming more elaborate, better lighting, more expensive materials, the kind of architectural refinement that signals important functions rather than just administrative work. Palace staff pass them in these corridors, Thessari servants and officials going about various duties. They see David and the child, and their reactions show pattern David starts to notice. They move aside to clear the path. They bow their heads slightly as the child passes. They show deference that seems disproportionate for random child walking with researcher. David assumes this must be child of someone quite important. Maybe daughter of senior palace official, someone whose position commands respect that extends to family members. That would explain why no one stops them, why people show that particular courtesy as they pass. But even with that explanation, David is starting to feel concerned. They've been walking for perhaps 10 minutes now, through corridors that are clearly not public access areas. The guards they pass are more formally positioned. The decoration is more elaborate. The entire atmosphere suggests they're approaching sections of the palace where important governmental or ceremonial activities occur. Where exactly are we going? David asks the child, beginning to think he should probably insist they turn back regardless of her enthusiasm for introducing him to her mother. To see my mother, the child replies as though this explains everything. She's in the audience chamber today. She has court, but she won't mind if we visit. She likes meeting interesting people. Audience chamber, court. These words suggest levels of formality and political importance that make David increasingly certain that he shouldn't be allowing this child to lead him wherever they're going. I think maybe we should go back to the gardens, David says, slowing his pace. Your mother is probably busy with important work, and I should finish my soil sampling. It's fine, the child assures him with the blithe confidence of young children who haven't yet learned to doubt their own assessments. She won't be angry. She likes when I show her things I find interesting. And you're interesting. You know about plants from other planets, and you explain things well. They're approaching massive ornate doors at the end of a long, formal corridor. Doors that are clearly entrance to something significant. The architectural scale, the elaborate decoration, the guards positioned in formal stance on either side. Everything communicates that these doors lead to chamber of major importance. David stops walking. I really don't think I should go in there. That looks like very formal space, and I'm just researcher. I'm wearing work clothes covered in soil. Whatever is beyond those doors isn't appropriate for me to enter without proper authorization. The child looks up at him with expression of patient amusement, the look that children give adults who are being unnecessarily worried about things the child knows are actually fine. It's okay, she says. Really, come on. She tugs his hand more insistently. And because David is still operating under assumption that someone will intervene momentarily, because he doesn't want to upset friendly child who's been so engaging, because the guards at the doors aren't showing any sign of stopping them, he allows himself to be pulled forward. The guards see them approaching. The child, still holding David's hand, still radiating that confident gold skin coloration that indicates she's completely comfortable with what she's doing. The guard's reaction is immediate and synchronized. They bow, formal deep bow that David recognizes from his cultural briefings as sign of profound respect. And they open the massive doors without requesting authorization, without asking questions, as though the child's presence is itself complete and sufficient credential for entry. The doors swing open smoothly, revealing the chamber beyond, the grand audience chamber. David recognizes it instantly even though he's never been here before. He's seen images in historical and cultural materials about the Thessari court. Its enormous formal space, soaring ceiling supported by elaborate columns, walls decorated with centuries of artistic achievement, the architectural embodiment of sovereign power and imperial continuity. And it's full of people. Perhaps 200 Thessari nobles, courtiers, officials, dressed in formal court attire, engaged in the complex social and political rituals that David knows characterize Thessari court proceedings, even though he's never witnessed them directly. The child pulls David across the threshold into the chamber, still chattering about something. David has stopped processing her words because he's suddenly acutely aware that he's wearing dirt-covered work clothes and entering one of the most formal spaces in the Thessari Empire while holding hands with small child. The reaction is immediate, synchronized, and absolute. Conversation dies, not gradually, instantly. Hundreds of voices cutting off mid-sentence, mid-word, as every person in the chamber registers what just entered. Bodies straighten from various casual postures into rigid formal attention. Courtiers who were engaged in relaxed discussion assume the kind of perfect formal bearing that indicates something of great importance just occurred. Guards throughout the chamber, stationed at intervals along the walls, positioned near the throne at the far end, drop to one knee in synchronized movement so practiced it appears choreographed. Their response is instantaneous and uniform, the kind of trained reaction that indicates they've performed this gesture countless times. The bow spreads through the chamber like wave. starting from those nearest the door where David and the child entered, rippling outward as awareness. David stands frozen just inside the threshold, still holding the child's hand, his mind racing to process what he's witnessing and what it means. The child who has been leading him through the palace for the past 15 minutes, the friendly, curious little girl who wanted to show him to her mother, is Princess Lyra. Daughter of Queen Seraphina, heir to the Thessari throne. That's why no one stopped them in the gardens, why the guards stepped aside without question, why palace staff moved out of their path with that particular deference, why people bowed as she passed in the corridors, why the massive doors to the audience chamber opened without authorization being requested. She's not daughter of palace staff member or administrative official. She's the princess. And David, covered in dirt from his soil sampling, wearing casual work clothes, completely unprepared for formal court interaction, is standing in the grand audience chamber holding her hand while the entire assembled court bows. The child looks up at David, smiling with uncomplicated pleasure of child who has successfully accomplished what she set out to do. She points toward the throne at the far end of the chamber. "My mother," she says simply, with pride that young children show when introducing people important to them. David's eyes follow where she's pointing. Queen Seraphina sits on the throne in full sovereign regalia, elaborate robes, crown representing 8,000 years of imperial continuity, the bearing and the presence that command attention even across the vast distance of the audience chamber. She's watching them. Her expression is complex, surprised certainly, calculating as she processes this unexpected situation, but underneath both there's something that might be amusement. Her skin shows mixture of colors. Surprised white flickering briefly, thoughtful blue, and curious gold suggesting she's genuinely interested in how this unprecedented scenario will develop. Lord Vethros stands in his position as chief counselor beside the throne. His skin shows alarm purple mixing with confused white. This situation has no precedent in any protocol he knows, and he's visibly uncertain about how to respond. Commander Cathara, positioned with other royal guard near the throne, shows protective purple but no actual defensive posture. The child is clearly safe and happy. There's no threat here that requires intervention, just situation that protocols weren't designed to handle. The assembled courtiers remain bowing, waiting for signal from the throne about how this moment should proceed. Some are showing curious gold in their skin patterns, genuinely interested in what's happening. Others show uncertain purple, aware this is irregular, but unsure whether it's problematic irregularity or harmless deviation from normal procedures. David realizes he should probably be bowing too. Everyone else in the chamber is showing formal respect to sovereign authority, and he's just standing here holding the princess's hand like they're casual companions, rather than like he's common researcher, who should never have been brought into the queen's presence without proper authorization and formal introduction. He attempts to bow while still holding Lyra's hand, awkward movement that's neither proper formal genuflection nor casual greeting. Just embarrassed attempt to show respect while literally attached to the child who seems completely unbothered by the formality surrounding them. Queen Seraphina's expression shifts toward something that's definitely amusement now. She rises from the throne, movement that causes the assembled court to deepen their bows reflexively, and walks down the steps of the dais toward where David and Lyra are standing near the chamber entrance. As she approaches, Lyra releases David's hand and runs forward to greet her mother with enthusiasm that has no awareness of court protocol or formal dignity. Seraphina catches her daughter with practiced ease, lifting her slightly in brief embrace before setting her down. "Lyra, my dear, I see you've brought a guest," Seraphina says with voice that carries across the silent chamber. "Though I notice you neglected to inform him of certain relevant details before bringing him to court. I told him I wanted him to meet you." Lyra protests with indignant tone of child who feels she communicated adequately. "He was doing interesting things with plants and soil, and I knew you'd want to know about it because you like the gardens." "I do indeed like the gardens," Seraphina agrees. "But when you bring someone to meet me during formal court session, it's customary to mention that I'm the queen and that court protocol applies. This poor man appears to be human botanist." She looks at David with assessing gaze. "Dr. Chen, I believe, from the agricultural exchange program, and he's clearly had no preparation for formal court presentation." David manages to find his voice, though it comes out more strained than he'd like. "Your Majesty, I apologize profoundly for this intrusion. I had no idea who your daughter was. She seemed like friendly child, and when she wanted me to meet her mother, I assumed. I didn't realize that the mother she wanted you to meet was the sovereign of the Thessari Empire. Seraphina finishes for him, her tone showing more amusement than anger. Yes, I can see how that detail might have been relevant information to receive before being led into the grand audience chamber during active court session. She looks down at Lyra with expression combining maternal affection and mild exasperation. Lyra, what have I told you about bringing people to see me without explaining who I am first? That I should tell them, Lyra admits reluctantly. But he was really interesting, and I wanted you to meet him right away, and I thought if I told him you were the queen he might not come, because adults get all nervous about that. Adults get all nervous, because proper protocol exists for approaching the throne, Seraphina says gently. Not because we're unkind, but because there are appropriate ways to conduct formal interactions that respect everyone's dignity and position. Dr. Chen deserved to know what he was walking into, so he could prepare appropriately. She turns back to David. Dr. Chen, I apologize for my daughter's enthusiastic disregard for protocol. Please stand normally. You're not required to maintain formal bow given that you were brought here under what might charitably be called false pretenses. David straightens carefully, acutely aware that 200 courtiers are still bowing, and that he's being addressed directly by the Thessari sovereign while covered in soil and completely unprepared for this interaction. Seraphina addresses the assembled court. You may rise. We appear to have informal visitor courtesy of the princess's initiative. Dr. Chen is human botanist working in our research gardens, and my daughter has decided we should meet him. Since we're already in this irregular situation, we might as well proceed with introductions rather than pretending this didn't occur. The courtiers rise from their bows with rustle of fabric and subtle expressions, showing various mixtures of curiosity, amusement, and bemused acceptance, that the princess has once again created situation that protocols weren't designed for. Seraphina gestures for David to approach the throne area. Not a command exactly, but clear indication that since he's already here, they might as well have proper conversation rather than conducting it across the length of the audience chamber. David walks forward, hyper-conscious of his dirt-covered work clothes and his complete lack of preparation for this moment. Lyra walks beside him, apparently pleased that her plan to introduce him to her mother is proceeding successfully despite the complications. When they reach appropriate distance from the throne, Seraphina addresses David with genuine curiosity. My daughter says you were doing interesting things with plants and soil. I confess I'm curious what captured her attention so thoroughly that she decided I needed to meet you immediately rather than waiting for proper introduction through official channels. David explains his research, the work on adapting human crop varieties for Thessari agricultural conditions, the soil chemistry analysis he was conducting when Lyra found him, the broader goals of the cross-species agricultural compatibility project. As he talks, he notices Seraphina's genuine interest. She asks informed questions about the research challenges, about specific soil chemistry variables, about whether similar adaptation work is being done with other alliance species crops. Her engagement isn't polite performance. She actually understands the technical details and cares about the agricultural implications. The gardens have been important to me since childhood, Seraphina explains. I find the work conducted there fascinating, the intersection of science and practical benefit to our people. Your research on crop adaptation could significantly improve our food security and our ability to support colonies where Thessari native crops don't thrive. I appreciate your Majesty's interest, David says, starting to relax slightly as the conversation becomes more about the work he knows rather than about court protocol he doesn't. The project has been going well. The Thessari botanists I'm working with have been extraordinarily helpful in understanding local soil conditions and identifying which genetic modifications might be most effective. Lyra interrupts with child's lack of concern for adult conversation flow. I told you he was interesting. He explains things really well, and he doesn't mind when I ask lots of questions. I can see why you enjoyed talking with him, Seraphina says to her daughter. Then to David. Lyra has been asking to visit the research gardens, but I've hesitated because I wasn't certain the researchers would welcome having curious child interrupting their work. It appears at least one researcher doesn't mind her questions. She asked very good questions, David says honestly. Thoughtful questions that showed she was actually processing the information rather than just asking random things. I enjoyed explaining the work to her. Would you be willing to serve as guide if I brought Lyra to visit the gardens officially? Seraphina asks. I'd like her to see the research being conducted there, and having someone who can explain the work in terms she can understand would be valuable. I'd be honored, Your Majesty, David responds. Lord Vethros, who has been observing this exchange with visible concern about protocol violations, speaks carefully. Your Majesty, while Dr. Chen's research is clearly valuable, and while his interaction with Princess Lyra has been appropriate, perhaps we should establish proper formal introduction procedures for future interactions, rather than continuing irregular contact that began through the princesses. Initiative. Lord Vethros, you're concerned about protocol, which is appropriate for your role, Seraphina acknowledges. But I'm less concerned about the irregularity than I am pleased by the outcome. My daughter chose to trust Dr. Chen led him by the hand through the palace, brought him to meet me, demonstrated confidence that he was someone worth introducing. That judgment has proven sound. Dr. Chen has been respectful, professional, and genuinely engaging with Lyra's curiosity in ways that benefited her rather than dismissing her as inconvenient child. She looks at David directly. The trust my daughter showed you by choosing to bring you here, by holding your hand and leading you through corridors and into my presence, that's not something she extends casually. Children are remarkably good at assessing character before social conditioning teaches them to mask their judgments. Lyra recognized you as someone safe and interesting. That recognition matters more to me than the protocol violations involved in how you arrived here. Dr. Chen, you're welcome to continue your research in the gardens, Seraphina says formally. And you're welcome to continue answering Lyra's questions if she visits you there, which I suspect she will now that she's discovered someone willing to explain science in terms she can understand. The irregular introduction is forgiven. Indeed, I'm grateful for it, as it's brought to my attention research I should have been more aware of and researcher whose work is clearly valuable. After the audience concludes, and David is escorted back to the gardens by palace staff who treat him with notably more deference than they showed before. Word has apparently spread that the human botanist was personally introduced to the queen by the princess. He tries to process what just occurred. He came to work at the gardens to study soil chemistry and plant genetics. 3 months of quiet research, minimal interaction with palace politics, focus on scientific problems rather than on diplomatic complexities. Then a friendly child took his hand and led him through corridors he had no authorization to enter, into the presence of the sovereign he had no standing to approach, creating moment where innocence intersected with absolute power in ways that no protocol was prepared for. And somehow, that irregular introduction became foundation for relationship with the royal family that formal channels would never have created. All because small child's trust placed him at the center of moment, where being chosen mattered more than following rules. The alien child led the human by the hand. He realized who her mother was when the court bowed. Small, warm grip, unhurried pace, chattering about nothing important. Following, assuming harmless mistake no one had corrected yet. The doors opened, conversation died, courtiers straightened. Guards dropped to one knee. The bow spread like a wave, practiced and absolute. Only then did he understand why no one stopped them. She looked up at him, smiling, still holding his hand. My mother. Innocence intersecting with absolute power. A ruler revealed not through crowns or commands, but through the quiet trust of a child, being chosen by that trust. Placing an ordinary human at the center of a moment no protocol was prepared for. Because sometimes